Appreciate your coming down today.
Oh, thanks, Kate. Great to be here.
Well, you're coming down from Boston. I'm so glad you were able to beat the traffic. So thank you for coming into the studio and talk with us about what you're going to be talking about this evening with the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. And just what is gender lens investing?
It's a great question because it can be very, very confusing to people. We are going to talk about gender lens investing and the interest in it and the growth of the field. But it is important to start with what it is. So gender lens investing is intentionally incorporating gender factors into your investment process. Just as important though, Kate, is what it's not, because people tend to think it's small, it's soft, it's pink, and it's not any of those things.
So is it just taking into, again, those factors when folks are investing? Now, you're with the U.S. Trust, you've been doing this for a while. You talk about womenomics, you talk about it's sort of like the bigger universe of the role that women play investing inside in economies. And I maybe kind of want to start there and then jump to how gender lens investing is so important. But the role of women in economics, I had the opportunity to look at, obviously, other press that you did, and you talked about that there's 4 focal points of women economics, starting with education.
Right, so if you think about the intersection of the increasing educated workforce, particularly women, right? Women earn the majority of undergraduate and masters and PhDs in the US, but increasingly around the world, women are more educated. That dovetails with the increasing social rights of women in terms of their ability to work, their ability to get documentation for their children, all sorts of things in emerging markets. The aspect of women starting enterprises and women's entrepreneurship, and then the growth of women in the economy, in the formal economy. So all those things are happening together. We call that womenomics. Broadly speaking, it's this increasing economic force of women around the world.
That's what I'm looking at. I'm going to play a little closer over here to this red tape. So so all of these factors basically play into women having an increased role in in the economies around the world. But let's talk a little bit about how you got to the U.S. Trust and how you got involved in this field to begin with.
Yeah, so I was working at the intersection of social change and gender and finance. And actually I was working with women's funds, like the Rhode Island Women's Funds, and with women philanthropists around the world. And I realized that they wanted their capital to go further. Right? They were looking to say, yes, I absolutely am going to philanthropically support organizations and policies that are inclusive. But I also want my investments to be in companies that are progressive in that way. It makes sense, right? But the bonus now is you don't have to choose, right? Because companies that are more inclusive are increasingly shown to also have stronger performance over time.
There's just empirical data that actually proves this. So it's not, it's just not anecdotal. It's just not saying we're investing in companies that, treat women, from employment to wages to all those factors. There's hard numbers that can show this.
Absolutely. The quantitative analysis, that's why I say this isn't soft. This isn't about ethically losing money for your values. This is about smart investing. And both men and women are looking for that edge when it comes to investments.
And one of the statistics I found when I was looking some things up about you here, women are 59% more likely to say that the social or environmental impact of their portfolio is important to them, but is also important to note, 58% of high net worth investors find it important, gender aside. So there's a huge appetite for this.
Absolutely. And the numbers go higher, Kate, when you talk about millennials. So 93% of millennials are saying that the social or environmental impact of their portfolio is important to them. I think women and millennials are seeing something that says, I want to be an authentic person in how I shop, in how I give, in how I vote, in how I spend my time. Oh yes, and my investments are about financing the future. So we like to say the future of feminism is finance.
And you're at U.S. Trust, when you talk about millennials, so if someone's not necessarily a very high net worth individual, someone's just starting to do investing, how do they even begin to even broach this as saying, I do want to do something that my investments mirror my, my value structure?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are more options now that are sort of democratizing this opportunity. There are exchange traded funds with very low minimums that are focused around gender factors. One of them launched a couple of years ago. There's a set of other opportunities coming forward. There are also opportunities to do community investments.
Okay.
So a focus both domestically and globally in microfinance, in community institutions that focus on women. So there are those are called community investment notes. So community investment notes and exchange trade funds. There's a few mutual funds that also are very proactive around women. So a little bit of research and you'll find some names. Talk to an advisor. If they don't answer you, if they say you can't do this, talk to another advisor.
Don't take no for an answer.
Exactly.
So what are you going to be talking about tonight with the Women's Fund? Basically what we went over. I mean, you're on the press circuit all the time. So I mean, what's on your plate for this evening?
So we're going to connect womenomics, as you talked about in those 4 factors. What's happening? Where are things changing faster than we think? Where are things a little slower than we might like? And then we're going to connect that to what does that mean for you as an individual in terms of how you give and the options that the Women's Fund has, how you spend, how you save, and how you invest. And how do you put that all together as a smart, savvy individual?
So, give a little teaser here, for folks maybe who are going tonight. I don't want to give away the store. Where are things moving faster?
So I think things are moving faster in corporate America right now. What's interesting is to that it's smart. You start to see new indices come out. Bloomberg put out a financial services gender leadership index because we understand that the war for talent in financial services companies and technology companies is going to be won by those companies that are more inclusive, right? We know that as a country, we are challenged by the fact that we don't have family leave policies that rival those around the world. And companies that are on the forefront of that, we at Bank of America just initiated 16 weeks paid family leave for everyone, right? So those kinds of factors are moving, albeit slower than I would like, but faster than you might have thought.
Is that 16 weeks? Is that industry leading?
There are some folks who are going beyond. There's a few companies that have said up to a year now, which seems almost Scandinavian, right? But I think we're learning, right, that the fact that engaging employees as an asset to be invested in, as opposed to a cost to be managed, is really the way to win in the long term. And that this aspect of inclusion allows for more innovation, allows for more energy, more pride, more, what they talk about as internal investment.
And we talk about maternal paid leave. What about companies in paternal? That's something that's a popular topic these days. Do you think companies are recognizing that and doing that in tandem with sort of recognizing the need for maternity leave?
Yeah, so ours is paid family leave, right? So maternal, paternal. I think that it's lagging, but it's really important for it to be both, right? Because one, we know from a research standpoint that when men are able to bond with their children, long term, it's better for society, it's better for families, it's better for the country. But also, if it seems like when you're hiring a woman, she's more likely to have maternity leave and he's not, then it does become a detriment, right?
It becomes a balance issue, yep, absolutely, yeah. for women. And let's talk a little bit as well, what's moving slower than you'd like?
So we are still challenged in many places around the world in terms of implicit bias.
Okay.
Here and other places in terms of how we're not even realizing how that discrimination is happening in evaluation. And, Sheryl Sandberg put it out there with the she's bossy.
Yep.
He's a leader, she's bossy question. But what I'm excited about is where we're using big data and technology to combat that.
Okay.
To be able to say, let's look at job descriptions and performance reviews and say, how is it that maybe without realizing it, we're not looking at people evenly. So I think the underlying aspect, I'm excited about where big data will go because data in the US and in developed countries in terms of performance reviews, but in emerging markets, if you think about what we're trying to do in the Sustainable Development Goals and gender equality being one of them, goal number 5 out of 17.
Okay.
But gender is really woven through what we know as a global economy we need for sustainable growth, gender equality. And it's that data to be able to understand what's going on in terms of maternal health care, in terms of access to education, in terms of employment history and so forth, that's going to drive differences.
As you said, a lot of data-based information. I was pulling up those statistics as to who's interested in this type of investing. I just kind of, I feel like just scratch the surface a little bit. I know you've got to go talk at the Women's Fund this evening, but is there anything else you'd like folks to know about you and what you do and where the Women's Fund of Rhode Island plays in all of this?
Yeah, so, I guess what I would say, Kate, is I feel like we're at this unusual place where you can have your cake and eat it too, right? Where all of a sudden, the thing that is good for your portfolio in terms of its performance is also good for the planet in terms of creating a world that works for all of us. And I see that as win-win, right? This is absolutely about gender equality, but when I go out and talk, I will have as many men come up to me as women and say, I'm so excited. Let me tell you about my amazing daughter. Let me tell you about the mother who I had who didn't get her due. Mm-hmm. And so this is really about all of us saying, what is it that is the future that we want to create together? It requires things like the Women's Fund doing their work in terms of policy and grant making, but they can't do it without us thinking about how we invest in those companies that are more progressive and leading.
Well, Jackie, I appreciate getting the overview of what you're going to talk about this evening. Again, battling the traffic to come down here to go local. So we very much appreciate it. We'll keep tabs on you. Hopefully we'll talk in the future and wish you the best this evening at RISD with the Women's Fund. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Jackie
Take care.
VanderBrug, thank you for coming in. Okay, fantastic. Here in the Go Local studio. Not every day you get Managing Director and Investment Strategist at U.S. Trust. That was Jackie VanderBrug. And to talk today that she is actually going to be speaking at the Women's Fund of Rhode Island event this evening. Now, again, she is the author of Gender Lens Investing, Uncovering Opportunities for Growth, Returns, and Impact. And as she wrapped up, again, talking about this, she said, you can have your cake and eat it too, making the case for data-driven, basically, analysis about why these types of investments actually respond well to portfolios, and again, for folks who are looking for this type of investment to begin with. So it was great to talk with Jackie here in the studio all about gender